I really wanted to record an episode around money because it's probably the one thing that either holds people back or it unlocks breathing life into success, whatever success means to each of us. Sure, we worry about how will I get clients, so I'm struggling to fill my group classes, or how do I change how I'm working so it's sustainable. We think of all these things and they're all life changing when we can solve them, but you can learn how to do those. But the thing about money barriers or feelings around money, they require a lot deeper work and can be much harder to navigate. So before I dive in case it's your first time here, welcome. I'm Samantha McMahon and I'm a former and qualified business trainer who became a teacher. And I left the classroom in January 2017 because it was no longer good for my health, both physically and mentally. I set up my tutoring business and over time realized that there was space for both my educational experience in business and my business experience to come together. So, in addition to tutoring, I work specifically with tutors and people who work in the education space to help them build lucrative businesses on their terms. So that means something that's sustainable so they aren't a slave to their businesses, and something that's really aligned with the impact they want to make alongside the life they want to lead. It's juggling all of that. It's really exciting work. And when thinking about money, whether it's pricing or feeling all sorts of feelings about how much you may want to earn and so on, it comes up a lot in my work because people are exploring things that they were either too afraid to explore or they're exploring how to bring an ambitious target to life. So, before I start delving into this whole concept of how we feel about money and pricing and all of that, I will make a point of saying that I'm not an expert in this field. I'm not a money mindset coach. I've had my own money mindset issues, which I continue to have, and it's something I'm always having to work on and navigate. So, everything I'm sharing is really around conversations I've had with clients, conversations I've had with myself, and things that I've just generally learned that I think might be interesting and useful to you. So, the first thing I want to talk about is guilt. This comes up a lot with educators. They feel this guilt around making money sometimes from what they're doing. And it doesn't help that there are so many people online who just add fuel to that narrative. But also, it comes in the form of feeling guilty for charging more or wanting a certain income target. And when I was making notes for this episode, there was actually a particular conversation I had with a client really recently that sprang to mind. She's at the higher end when it comes to what she charges for tuition, and it's very aligned with the income goal that she has and who she works with. But she's always had this inner conflict about feeling guilty about charging that much or worrying about what other people might think about her charging that much. And she reached this point where it was really paralyzing. And she's one of my one to one clients. So we decided to have a bit of a one off conversation about it because really we'd reached this pinch point where she had to make some decisions. And something I shared was with her was this concept of adding meaning to money because it's something that really unlocked things for me. My business has grown profit wise year on year for 9 years, but it took this kind of different trajectory all of a sudden at one point, a positive trajectory, as in my business was bringing in more than I imagined it could. And it made me want to grow even more and explore possibilities. But I did feel a bit of guilt. In fact, I don't know whether the guilt would be the right word really, but it was more of this discomfort because I was thinking, well, surely I should just be happy with this. But despite that feeling, I still wanted more. And so I explored why I was feeling these conflicting emotions. And I realized that the reason I wanted more wasn't just for the sake of it was because of what I knew it was unlocking in my future. I knew that earning more meant that my husband and I could potentially save money for a big deposit so that we could have a lower mortgage because my husband's 12 years older than me. So I didn't really want us to have this massive mortgage. So earning more would give me that future security. I wanted to really put more into my pension because I started my private pension late. I mean, I don't know what late means, but it was late. And it meant that I would also be able to see potentially a private dermatologist for this condition that I have instead of waiting over a year on the NHS waiting list, which I'm still on. It meant that I was able to pay myself back for the £20,000 I spent on fertility treatment. And it meant that I was able to build memories with my family and facilitate that instead of putting pressure on them. And when I realized what making more money really meant to me, when I added meaning to that money, I no longer felt guilty and I no longer felt the discomfort. And it really infiltrated the work that I was doing with my clients because I made sure we always had a conversation about what they wanted from their lives so that they too could see how that money was going to enable that. It was the very conversation I had with the client who was struggling, and it really unlocked things for her. When I asked her what would earning more mean to her, she realized that she didn't have to feel guilty because it meant that she could continue helping students for longer by charging more and therefore earning more, her business earning more. It was becoming more sustainable because she didn't have to work quite as many hours and burn out like she had been in the past. So that's the big one. If you struggle with setting financial targets, which are important, by the way, if you just get into the cycle of wanting more, more isn't a number, and therefore you never really have a gauge for how well you're doing. So if you struggle with things like this, or if you struggle with pricing, assigning meaning to the money that you want to earn, or even working backwards from the things that you want out of your life and your future, that can really help. And it can give you the best clarity. It's better than any formula or anything like that because really, if you're trying to work out things like how much should you charge, there's quite a simple formula that you could use just to generate the price. But this isn't about the price that you're charging. It's making sure that it suits how many hours you want to work right now. And it's about saying, what will this mean for me tomorrow, for the future? Am I creating something that's sustainable, that allows me to do the things that are really important to me right now, that gives me the options in the future so that I'm safe? All of these things are so important. And I actually think that if we don't build a business around the things that we want and the future we want, then it's a kind of wasted opportunity. Because if you think about it, if you work for an employer, you get so many perks. Sure, there are lots of cons as well. But from a financial security point of view, it's great. You have the secure income. You often have a pension. You have the paid annual leave. You might have other benefits. So, why would you walk away from that to set up your own business if you've actually got less security? Sure, you might have more freedom and flexibility right now, but if it's going to land you in a position where you're going to be stuck, then it hasn't really secured your future, hasn't really given you that freedom. So making decisions based on what we want out of our lives now and in the future is the gift that we have as business owners. We are in that position where we don't have someone else making decisions for us. We can make the decisions for ourselves and we can change how things go as they need to. Another thing that's really important when it comes to money is to do the thing that doesn't feel exciting, but it's really valuable, which is making sure you have this routined way of being really familiar with the numbers in your business and your life, really, because the two are interlinked. This is something that I work very closely with for my clients on my one to one program. I encourage everyone to do it, actually. It's a staple part of the program, regardless of which position you're in. And in the Tutors Mastermind, there's in-depth training on how to do that, how to check in with your numbers and what kind of routine to get into. Now, if you're a masterminder and you're not sure where that training is, by the way, just drop me a message. I'll send you over the link. And it's a staple part of everything I offer because understanding what's happening in your business from a money perspective is really tangible. And it means that you can then make very solid decisions. Tell me if you can relate. Before I got into the habit of making sure that I had this accurate and up-to-date snapshot of the numbers in my business, before I started planning things based on that, I would kind of make decisions based on feelings. And I'd kind of hold my breath for my annual tax return to see how my business was actually doing. And when I think back to those times, I really kick myself because as someone who's been in this world for a long time, I should have known better. And it would have allowed me to actually get my business to the place I wanted it a lot faster. So, a few things I have in place is I use a CRM for this, but you don't have to. I've created an automation so that every sale is logged in real time to my CRM, and I've created a dashboard that always shows me a real time view of how much money I've made alongside a breakdown of where that money has actually come from. So that gives me a kind of sales focused view. But I also have some reports set up in my accounts package that shows me income, expenses, and therefore profit. And I run that report once a month to check the health of my business. And by doing this, it's allowed me to decide whether or not to invest quite a large sum of money in business coaching, for example. Now, if I hadn't done this, I would have based my decision on how it felt. And I would have undoubtedly have been really hesitant because it felt like a lot of money and it feels like surely I can't afford that amount of money. But when I look at the numbers in my business, I can afford it. My business can afford it. And I know it's worthwhile as an investment because I already know the return I'm going to get on investment from my coaches. And since we're just talking about money, let's have a quick conversation about that return on investment when you're thinking about investing in something like coaching. This is one of the hardest decisions to make because you don't know if you're going to get a return on investment unless you actually invest in the first place. But you feel hesitant to invest in the first place because you don't know if you're going to get a return on investment. So it's really confusing, and there's no way around that. You have to do your due diligence, and at some point, you just have to take a pinch of intuition and take a leap of faith. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. And that's the risk you have to take. But you can lower that risk of making a bad decision when deciding whether or not to invest in coaching or whatever by just doing some due diligence. But also, what's really important is to decide what return on investment actually looks like for you. Because when it comes to crunch time, when it comes to paying that money, that's what it comes down to in your mind. And you wonder whether you're going to make back that amount of money and then some ideally to make it worthwhile. But return on investment when it comes to business support doesn't always work like that. It's not always transactional. When I first sought out the business coaches who I work with, I made a return on investment in a monetary way really fast. So I had made back what I'd spent on them and then I was in profit. So that was great. That was a really easy way of me knowing that it was a great investment. But when I decided to work with them for longer, I knew my return on investment wouldn't be monetary, wouldn't be like that because I knew that's not actually what I was investing in. That's not what I needed from them. I needed guidance. I needed clarity. I needed people to sense check my ideas. I was doing things I'd never done before. I still am actually. And they're experienced in those areas. So I needed their experience and so on. So the second investment I made in them probably won't result in me directly making back that money the way it did the first time around, but that's not the return on investment that I need. So this is such an important thing to pinpoint. What is it that you need? Of course, we all ultimately we're investing in our businesses because we want it to be more lucrative. But what stage of that are you at? I can share some really amazing numbers with you from my clients, from my one-to-one clients. For instance, one of my clients after 2 months made back more than what she spent working with me. That was on my program, and she has continued to make more money, so she's totally in profit. But the majority of my clients haven't. But that doesn't mean that they're not getting a return on their investment because when they started working with me, they wanted to start at a different point. Most of them are in a position where they want to build their business in a way that's really going to pay off later in terms of being lucrative whilst being sustainable. Because the big problem that most people come to me with is that they're burning out, that they are overwhelmed, that they're working unsustainably, or they're really confused about which direction to go in. They have so many ideas. So the work we do will result in their business being lucrative, but that might come after they've actually finished working with me. But it may happen as a result of the work that we did together. So when we're thinking about money, we also need to think about how we're investing it back into our business and how that affects the payoff that we want when we're thinking of how much money we want to make. It's the odd adage of you have to spend money to make money. And there's a lot of truth in that. But you also have to spend that money wisely, otherwise, it doesn't come true. So far, we've talked about assigning meaning to money so that you're not just thinking about how much you want to make in this sterile way or how much you want to charge, but you're doing it in a more meaningful way because then you'll have some real heart behind that and you'll be a lot more confident in trying to achieve it. You won't have that guilt and a lack of confidence holding you back. We've also talked about the importance of investing in your business and in yourself, and when doing so, being really clear on what return on investment looks like for you, because it's not always monetary. And linked to that, to help you make those decisions, you can also look at the money side by making sure that you're really familiar with the up to date numbers in your business rather than waiting for the annual tax return like I used to, because that helps you make tangible decisions on how much to spend or how much you want to, how much, what your target is, income targets. Now, I'm just going to circle back to this whole thing about how much should I charge? I touched on it earlier because it's one of the hardest things to decide. I find it really hard. I don't really know where I heard this, but I know I heard it somewhere. But people often say that you're charging well or that you've got your charging right if you face some resistance from potential clients. So essentially, although it feels great when everyone says yes, that's often an indication that you've got room to increase how much you're charging. We often wear our conversion rates like a badge of honor, like everyone I speak to says yes, but it's not always a great sign. Sometimes you actually want a lower conversion rate because it means that you're charging well. And of course, if you charge more, you kind of need less clients to make the same amount of money. Now, this is a principle that I can get behind because I do think there's a lot of truth in it. It's very easy to chase metrics that make us feel good, like how many likes we have on a social media post or how many people say yes to working with us when we speak to them. That feels good. It's a great little dopamine hit, but it's not necessarily what you need to be aiming for if you're thinking strategically about your business, about your financial goals. The number of likes you get on social media isn't as important as how many clients that translates to. And incidentally, I actually find that with my own business, the posts that get the fewer likes are actually the ones that make more sales. It's very bizarre, but it's a trend that I have noticed year on year in my business. And from a sales point of view, it feels great when almost everyone you speak to, they say yes and they end up buying from you because it makes you feel really, really good. You're a good salesperson, you've got your marketing right, you're speaking to the right people, and so on. And all of that's true. But if nobody is saying no or hesitating, then it could also mean that part of the reason they're saying yes is because they think, "Oh, this is a great deal and I'm going to snap it up before it changes." I'm not saying this is always the case because, I don't think there's a blanket rule we can apply to any of this. Every business, every situation has its own nuance. But generally speaking, I've certainly experienced that I've made more money when my pricing has resulted in a few more no's from potential clients. And it has also resulted in my business being more sustainable and flexible to facilitate the way I live and the way I work because I haven't needed to work as much to make the same amount of money. It means the support I give my clients is better because I'm more dedicated to them. I'm not spread thin. So I know that talking about money can feel incredibly uncomfortable, but it's important we normalize these conversations, I think, because we all need money to survive. We all want the things that we want, and most of them cost money. And money is such an important enabler. Money helps my clients who have children be more present as parents because, they don't have to work as much. Money helps one of my clients be a carer to a loved one whilst working in a way that's not burning her out. Money is meaningful, but we just have to make sure we know what it means to us so that we can make decisions that are right for us in a way. where we're not feeling guilty or worrying about what other people think. Because if I think about what other people might think and I compare that to the importance of my pension or my husband and my future or the memories I want to build in my business, what other people think becomes incredibly insignificant. And therefore, it doesn't hold me back because I've got that meaning. So I hope this episode has given you a couple of moments that have been thought provoking. And if nothing else, I hope you found it interesting. Thanks as always for listening. And if you do have a quick moment, I'd be very grateful if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to the YouTube channel because it helps me reach more people. And one of the reasons I have this podcast is to help as many tutors as possible, since it's a community that helped me so much in my early days. So thanks again for spending this time with me, and you'll hear from me on Wednesday.